My name is Jessica Dwyer, and I am very happy to be here at the Alamo Drafthouse with Universal Studios, bringing home the King of the Vampires in Renfield with the wonderful and legendary King of the Vampires himself, Mr. Nicolas Cage. And I believe that is him coming down right now. Hello, sir.
Hi there. Hey, everybody. Nice to see you at one of my favorite theaters in the world. Is it just us tonight? We're not going to have Chris McKay and
no
Robert
Chris,
Kirkwood?
unfortunately,
Okay,
but
good.
I'm very
There's
happy
more to talk about.
Oh, I've got plenty here, sir. I'm going to pick your brain. So my first question for you is, the allegory of the vampire is one of the most used in storytelling. I was curious about if you could talk as an actor as well as a fan of the genre, why it makes it so fascinating and adaptable in film and in stories.
Well, I think that although Dracula is a supernatural character, it's dealing with, in my view, very human experience. The idea of supplanting an addiction like alcohol or heroin or sex with blood, and you can relate to that. Or even the idea of eternal existence of some sort and having your heart broken again and again and again, which is really the curse of Dracula. To me, that's a very human condition, that experience. So I think that's why, whether consciously or subconsciously, it can be relatable to people, and they can feel that, I think, somehow, even subliminally, in the performance of Dracula.
Great answer. And I mean, come on, how he knows. So one thing that you've talked about a lot in this, and again, this kind of feeds into the original question, was the fact that this film deals with a toxic relationship, but also one thing that I think that you brought to this is beautiful is it also talks about Dracula's loneliness and his faded glory. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you built upon that and also that relationship with Nick.
I didn't really build upon the feeling of faded glory. I think Dracula in this case is such a narcissist, he's always glorious, even when he's burnt to a crisp. But this movie examines that which is the toxic relationship, which is really relevant, especially now. It's on people's minds. Abuse in the office between bosses and employees, but you can take it also into the love affair where something starts off so sweet and kind and then devolves into that which is ugly, like possession or ownership, and it doesn't resemble anything close to love anymore. I think that excuse me, Dracula and Renfield probably at one time had just a marvelous journey on the road together as rogues on the road. They probably were. He was a bad influence, Dracula, but boy, did they have fun. And then it turned sour, and this is where this movie begins. But they could do a prequel. That would be fun.
He's the friend that drags you into the predicaments where you get arrested.
Yeah, the bad influence. Hey, we're going to go to the nightclub. We're going to go to Miami next. We're going to have some fun, aren't we, Renfield?
Well, and that's one thing that I liked about it, too, was that Dracula actually does love him. And I think Renfield loves Dracula, and there's a bond there.
Yeah, I think that was something that was on our minds, both Nick and myself, as we were thinking about the history of these two, that there had to be some affection of some kind, even almost like father-son, where that can also lose its content of love and devolve into abuse,
Oh, definitely. Now, one thing that really made me happy with this film and your performance was knowing that you were a fan of Bela Lugosi and Christopher Lee, and how you somehow do both of them at the same time within this role. You're the child of Bela and Chris, and also Lon Chaney, and I wanted to know how you brought all of those together and and basically became all three.
Well, Abe, thank you. See, Bela Lugosi, as magnificent as he was in the 1931 Universal picture, wasn't my Dracula. My Dracula was Christopher Lee in the Hammer horror films. I liked how ferocious he was. I liked the hammer thing. I liked the hairdo, the 60s hairdo. I liked the clothes. But even still, those performances were only launching points. They were starting off points. And then, believe it or not, the biggest influence came from my father, August Coppola, who always spoke with, let me tell you something, Nicholas, let me explain something to you, okay? And it was like loaded with tension. I mean, that's in the movie. That is August. And he always spoke with distinction. And I said, well, Dad, what is this continental bullshit accent? Why are you talking like it? You want to know why I speak like this, Nicholas? Let me explain, okay? I'm a literature professor, okay? I made a decision to speak with distinction. And of course, he was right. He had a point. He had students, and he was talking about great arts, writing, Melville, Shakespeare, whatever it was. So he had a point. And then the other influence, who also spoke with the mid-Atlantic accent, was Anne Bancroft. I mean, believe it or not, I thought her performance in The Graduate as Mrs. Robinson was very seductive and Dracula-esque. I mean, is that what you're saying? Would you like me to seduce you? Well, I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought of it. Benjamin. Doesn't he look like the kind of boy you just have to fight off? Yes, he does.
After you said that, I've seen it in the trailers now. I'm like, oh yeah, he's like moving his head just like Anne Bancroft, and it's really unnerving now that you've brought that up.
So more than Lugosi, it was Bancroft and Coppola, August Coppola. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you kind of talked about this, which is Dracula is sort of the perfect predator who lives in plain sight. He hides the animal within him. When your Dracula morphs into the fangs, he looks like a shark that mated with a cobra. Can you talk about the aspect of how the animal movements and those factors built into your Dracula?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked, because some thought did go into that. We had two excellent people that were helping with the movement. One was our director, Chris McKay, and the other was the stunt director, Chris Brewster. And the two of them, the two Chris's, worked with me very early on. I said, I want Dracula who is elegant and eloquent, but when he's in attack mode, that's the only time I want to wear contacts. Other than that, I want you to see the emotion through the eyes, but when he's on attack, then the red contacts, which Christopher Lee used so well, and then the movements have to be top predator. So think big cats or cobras, and so always like, and early on, like Chris McKay and I, we would design the moves together. He had his little camera in his hand, and I would be like going right into the lens of his camera, ha! And that idea of now let's eat wasn't in the script. That was something that okay, now let's see, and then go into shark mode, go into cobra mode, and even the moves had to be like with like claws, and so everything was becoming big cat, jaguar, leopard, and all that. So the elegance was gone, and then the predator animality was in.
So I actually was on the set, and I got to see you film the fight sequence with the vampire hunters that you guys probably haven't, or you did see. And I was curious about, it was awesome watching you psych yourself up for these fight scenes. Where do you go in your head for that? Because you were amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, for some reason, has to be
No pressure.
How many tricks do I give away? For some reason, I started hearing Latin, like the ancient language, Latin, and I started remembering like really foul, pornographic things that were being said in the old, the first Exorcist movie that Friedkin did that was so beautiful, and I was like, and wanting to say really disgusting, profane things in Latin, and then the anger of being sort of rejected by, I don't want to get too metaphysical or theological here, but rejected by the love of, you know, what is holy, and therefore going deeper and deeper into, like, you know, the Simon Magus aspect of, well, if you're not going to love me, I'm going this way, and get angry about it, and this curse, and being angry that I'm stuck here doing this shit, you know.
That is a fantastic answer. I don't know how I can follow up that. But one thing, kind of piggybacking on that, you and Nick Holt both have what I call the silent film actor look and talent, where you don't even have to say anything. You project so much in your eyes and your movement and just your expressions. And especially in this film, it came across that way to me, what I've seen of it. Can you talk about that? Because one thing, I've seen images of you as Dracula where you're spot on Conrad Veidt from The Hands of Warlock and mixed with Nosferatu. And it's absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. Well, Holt is somebody that I admire. He's really my kind of actor, in that he can be, he has such tremendous comedic timing and a real repartee and a rhythm, and I don't think that's something you can learn. I think that's something that's in your body, that you're born with, and I think he has that. Almost Chaplin-esque. You pointed out the silent film. With his expressions can't, like that one joke in the beginning of the Catholic Church, whatever, and he's like, like that. It reminds me of Charlie Chaplin. And he can also turn on a dime and be vulnerable. He can be like James Dean vulnerable, but he off of being hilarious and with comedic timing. And that's a very hard space to fill. Not a lot of people can fill that space, but he does. And I was supporting him in this movie. And a lot of my cues, when I think about supporting actor, what that means to me is I have to literally support my star. And so, you know, Nick and I didn't get much time to rehearse with him, but right off the get-go, because he was busy learning a dance number, which didn't make it in the movie. He's a hell of a dancer. But I was just throwing lines at him and trying to rehearse with him anytime he was anywhere, like even a makeup test or hair and wardrobe or whatever, or even costumes. I was just throwing lines to see how he was going to react. So I knew what flavor he was bringing as my star, so that I could then support him and fit within that flavor. And so that was really what the thinking was. Happily, we both enjoy the comedy and the rhythm of comedy and the timing of comedy. So we were able to bounce off of each other and get to speed very quickly.
Well, and that kind of feeds into my next question, which is the balancing of horror and comedy in a film like this is very important. And finding that vibe is, you know, it's the extremes of humanity, is laughing and then screaming. Yeah. And can you talk about finding that within this film and not overdoing one or the other?
Well, and even screaming while you're laughing, or laughing while you're screaming simultaneously. And in that case, it was a matter of, you know, like my favorite of this, what I think this aspires to be, is that delicious feeling I had when I first saw American Werewolf in London. Yes. I was a teenager in the cinema, and it was really slapping me around because I didn't know where we were going, and I was laughing and screaming, and I genuinely scared and then really amused. But with this character, I was trying to figure out, how can I fuse those two? Now I'm funny, now I'm scary, but I'm scary and funny at the same time. Right. So it was things like, let's eat is scary and funny. It's funny, but it's a little unnerving, you know? So trying to find ways to just fuse the two, so it wasn't a matter of oscillating at all. It was simultaneous.
Well, and that kind of, wonderfully enough, feeds into my next question. Let's eat. Which is, you make villains. You do great as playing villains, and what you do is you make us like you as a villain. You bring a likability to them. How do you do that? Like you did with Face Off, and now with Dracula, as Castor Troy. We liked you. even though you were not a nice man.
Well, and everything I'm doing in this movie, attacking these sensitive, damaged people who have been through hell and ripping them apart in the support group, everything about that is all wrong, you know. But I think if you can tap into the id, if you can tap into that which exists in all of us, if you scratch the surface of anyone long enough, you will reach the inner cave woman or the inner cave man. You're going to reach it. So I think that there's a vicarious transference, communication that happens if you really are honest about it. Then you can look at it and go, okay, well, that's horrible, but I get it, you know, and I understand. I kind of like it. I don't want to admit it, but I can watch him do it. I don't have to do it.
Well, and also that scene's interesting because of the metaphor of this is the kind of person that will rip you apart if you're one of those people.
And you kind of have the license to do that if your name is Dracula.
Exactly. Well, and the one thing I talked to Chris McKay about when I got to interview him for this film was I asked him, and I'm curious what your response will be, is what music would be your Dracula's theme music? What song? Because he had mentioned that when you were filming some test shots, that he played the theme from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is amazing and some of the best film music in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
But what would your pick for his theme be?
Oh, I think anything from Bach would work. Toccata and Fugue, obviously. Oh, that's a bit cliche, but anything that Bach did would be totally right on for this Dracula. But he was a kind of rock and roll Dracula. That was important to Chris McKay, that he was a rock and roll Dracula. And I remember, this is weird and really off topic, but I remember for the longest time I wanted to be a rock star. And my idea of being a rock star was being like rail thin. And wearing like glittery silver pants and a really tight tank top and being really pale and skinny, and then walking out on stage, and then there would be a low bass note going boom. That's all you would hear, boom, 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 and all I would sing would be one word, and I'd be standing like this, like a teacup, and I'd be going trick, 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 trick. That was my version of the ultimate rock star.
That is glorious.
So that would be working for this Dracula.
Yeah. I mean, that's all we'd need. And that kind of feeds into the next question. It's sort of like you're reading my mind. Did you steal any of the clothes or props from this film? Because why not?
Great clothes. My gosh, what a team. The wardrobe department on this was inspired. They brought it all. They brought the red velvet. They brought all the rings. Maybe they thought there was something in me that would like it. I don't know, Tom Gorman. Do you think I could be a guy in Las Vegas in a leather jacket that wears big gold rings? But they brought it all in, and I thought, you know, this is really weird because I actually had that jacket back in 1985. It's still in my closet. It's in archives. Weird.
I can't believe you didn't steal the cape. The cape is
I didn't need to. It's somewhere in my closet.
Oh my gosh. So one thing that I had to ask, knowing I was going to get to talk to you about this, was you've worked and did gloriously as Ghost Rider in the world of comics. And give some love for Ghost Rider, please, because
thank you.
It's a fantastic.
Doesn't happen often. Thank you, guys.
I love Ghost Rider.
I do too. I love that character.
But I wanted to ask you now that you've got like you're kind of become a horror guy, and I love it. Is there a horror comic or character that's supernatural that you would love a chance to play, either DC or Marvel or whatever? Because I would love to see you back in that realm.
I think that, well, if I could just speak a little bit about why horror works for me. My two favorite genres are movies that made me want to be a film actor, are movies like Midnight Cowboy, which I saw on the television when I was a kid. It just came on TV, and I was watching John Voight and Dustin and that, and I was just like, wow, I think I know what great acting is now. Or James Dean in East of Eden. And so those are the movies that made me want to be an actor. But then somewhere along the way, I started thinking about my surrealistic dreams with film performance. You know, I do love that which is naturalistic, and I try to experiment with that and go back to that with like movies like Pig. But it wouldn't make any sense for me to try and apply my German expressionistic fantasies that I was interested in when I was 5, when my dad was playing Nosferatu and giving me nightmares. I had to put it somewhere. And I thought, okay, well, if I can find a character like Peter Lowe in Vampire's Kiss, if he's losing his mind, as sad as that is, it stands to reason he could start behaving or moving like Max Schreck from Nosferatu if he thinks he's turning into Nosferatu. So that was interesting. So I thought that with horror, I could start to, or if I'm playing a supernatural character like Dracula, I could start to move in more expressionistic ways and try to go a little further into the realm, if you will let me, surrealism, or that which is expressionistic with film performance. I didn't want to be stuck in one genre, and I didn't want to be stuck in one style of film performance. And so it was a matter of finding movies that I could lend my vision to, but at the same time inform emotionally with genuine emotional content, so we would still have that vicarious connection. I think the reason why I'm still here or able to have these conversations is because I think I've had a loyal group of film enthusiasts who know that I'm not going to try and fake it with them. I'm going to try and give them some real heart. But it can be a big Baroque performance or an expressionistic performance, or it can be a quiet and minimal performance like Pig. So it's just keeping the options open and keeping challenged and remaining a student. Always be a student, always try to evolve, always try to push towards something. It may not always work, but at least the effort is genuine. That was the thinking.
Well, I have to say, I'll go off a little from this, but to Pig. That movie came about a year after my dad passed, and it destroyed me beautifully. And give some love for that film, because it absolutely gorgeous, and I needed that. So thank you for that.
Sure, yeah.
Just absolutely brilliant performance. But also, I'm not going to let you off the hook.
Okay.
What comic book character would you like to play?
She knows that if I say this, it's gonna go viral.
Yes,
so that's what happens.
and it will
with
happen.
Comic books. You know what's so weird, and I've told this story before, but my brothers used to look and go, "What's wrong with Nikki?" I mean, because I would be just sitting in my bedroom staring at a Hulk comic book, like 9, 10, just staring at it for hours. I wouldn't take my eyes off it because I don't know what you were thinking. But I was thinking, God, I'd love to see a movie with the Hulk. I mean, but they just don't have the ability right now to make it work. But I know one day the tech is going to get there, and it's going to happen, and it's going to look fantastic, and it's going to take over Hollywood. And look what happened. It did. It was prescient thinking. Even still, I hesitate to answer your question, but heck, I've already gone on record. I think the Spectre, Jim Corrigan in the DC, old DC comic books, that was a very cool character.
That feeds into the Spider-Man noir that you did as well, which was really great.
That was a lot of fun too. But the Spectre is hard to pull off, and I've said this because he's literally meant to be the wrath of God. So how do you can't? I mean, there's no weakness. There's no fault line. There's no kryptonite. So I don't know if it really works.
I'd love to see it happen, though. Even animated, it would be beautiful.
Well, animated, I think, might be the way to go.
Yeah. There you go, everybody. Animated.
Spectre.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Which is excellent.
Yeah. Also, Batman. Oh, I'm not going to say it. Wrong studio. But I did want to ask you, because I think this is the last question we'll have time for, but you brought Dracula back to Universal, and the classic Dracula, and I wanted to know, as a fan yourself of these films, how important that is to you and getting to bring to life the King of the Vampires.
Well, it was a magical invitation. Universal called me. I didn't call them, and I was just sort of like, wow, I've often thought about playing Dracula. And this is the house. This is the house that launched Bela Lugosi as Dracula. And I thought, well, this is not something you say no to. But the pressure was, it's been done well several times. It's been done not very well far more often, and you want to be on the side of doing something well, especially with this house. So it was, okay, you don't want to repeat, you may want to homage, but how do you bring something to it that is your own? And that was when I started thinking about August Coppola and Anne Bancroft and how I might be able to give it some flavor that might be a little fresh,
Wonderful. Well, sir, thank you for bringing Dracula home.
Thank you for having me here, and thanks for coming out tonight, guys.
And everybody, we're going to do a group photo. So put on all of your regalia that you have in front of you. And we're going, yeah, they've got sunglasses, they've got
cool.
fangs, they've got
far
rings.
out.